The afternoon sun spilled golden light across the luxurious cliffside resort. From a distance, the scene looked like a postcard. Sapphire waves crashing against jagged rocks below, seagulls soaring on the salty breeze, and the faint hum of laughter from tourists dining on open terraces. But for Elena, the pregnant young wife of millionaire Victor, this was more than just a vacation, it was supposed to be a new beginning. Victor had promised her that the stress of the city, the noise of endless business calls, and his cold, distracted attitude would all fade away once they escaped here. Just the two of us, and our baby, he had whispered before booking the trip. Elena wanted to believe him. She walked beside him now, her flowing dress moving with the wind, one hand resting on the small swell of her belly. The ocean smelled alive, sharp, and free. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her eyes filled with wonder. For a moment, she truly believed they were reconnecting, that perhaps Victor still loved her. But inside Victor's mind, there was no beauty. His jaw was tight, his dark eyes calculating as he looked not at the ocean, but at the cliff edge. Every step they took closer filled him with a twisted sense of relief. He had rehearsed this moment countless times. To the world, Victor was a charming businessman, adored at galas and respected by powerful men. But behind that mask was a man drowning in greed, ambition, and secrets too dark to keep hidden. His wife, innocent, trusting, pregnant with his child, had become, in his eyes, a liability. She knew too much about his dealings, had started asking questions about the missing money, the strange phone calls, the mysterious partners who visited at night. The cliffside path grew narrower, the railing ending abruptly where the jagged rocks stretched out like teeth below. The sea roared hungrily, as though waiting for what was to come. Elena, unaware, walked to the very edge, her face glowing as she breathed in the salty air. "Victor, look. It feels like the whole world is spread out in front of us." Victor forced a smile. His hand twitched at his side. The perfect view, the perfect moment. No witnesses. Just the endless ocean ready to swallow her. He could already imagine how it would be explained later, a tragic accident. The pregnant wife, dizzy from the heat, slipping tragically to her death. People would grieve, but no one would question him. With her gone, his empire would be secure, his secrets safe, his fortune untouched. Behind him, the sun dipped slightly lower, casting long shadows across his sharp features. He stepped closer to her, his polished shoes scraping against the gravel. "Yes," he murmured, his voice low and almost trembling, though not from love, from anticipation. "The whole world." Elena turned her head, her smile warm, innocent. "I can't wait to share it with our child," she said softly, placing his hand gently over her stomach. For the briefest moment, something flickered in Victor's chest, not guilt, but annoyance. How easily she trusted him. How blind she was to the truth standing right beside her. The waves crashed harder, echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. The wind whipped at Elena's dress, pulling her hair into her eyes. She laughed, brushing it away, completely unaware of the danger pressing in around her. And then, Victor's expression shifted, the mask of a loving husband fell away, revealing cold calculation. His hand tightened at her back, ever so subtly guiding her closer to the edge. The cliff beneath them was unforgiving, sharp, merciless. Victor's heart pounded. One push, 1 second, and it would all be over. He leaned closer, whispering words she couldn't hear over the roar of the sea, words that would haunt her in the seconds too. "Come." And with that, the deception was complete, the stage set for betrayal, the air charged with the storm that was about to break. The world seemed frozen in that fragile moment, the air heavy with the scent of salt and sea. Elena stood at the cliff's edge, her back to the endless horizon, her hand brushing her hair from her face as the wind tangled it again. She laughed softly, the sound pure, untainted. To her, this was love, her husband bringing her to a place so beautiful it felt like paradise. To Victor, it was the perfect stage for the act he had long rehearsed. He moved closer, his polished shoes crunching on loose gravel, each step deliberate. His wife turned, her eyes shining, completely oblivious to the darkness in his own. "Victor," she said warmly, "this is the happiest I've felt in months. Maybe this is exactly what we needed." Her words struck him, but not with guilt. Instead, they fueled his irritation. Happiness. She didn't understand the burden he carried, the debts, the deals, the dangerous promises he had made to men who didn't forgive failure. Men who had warned him that his curious wife might ruin everything. Men who had suggested that accidents happened all the time. Victor's face softened into a false smile, his teeth gritting behind it. Yes, Elena, he said smoothly, this is exactly what we needed. The sea below roared, a voice of chaos, crashing against the rocks like thunder. It seemed to call to him, do it. Do it now. His hand hovered near her back, the urge rising like a tide, unstoppable. She turned again toward the ocean, spreading her arms as though she could embrace the whole world. The white fabric of her dress whipped wildly in the wind, making her look angelic, otherworldly. And that was when Victor struck. With a sudden, brutal force masked as a subtle shove, he thrust his hand against her back. Elena gasped, the sound sharp and filled with shock. Her body lurched forward, her hands scrambling at the empty air. For one terrifying heartbeat, she seemed to hang suspended above the abyss, her white eyes locking onto his. Victor, she whispered, her voice breaking, unable to comprehend. But there was no answer, only the cold gleam in his gaze as he stepped back, allowing gravity to take her. Her scream split the air, raw and heart-wrenching, carried away by the wind as she tumbled down the cliffside. Her arms flailed, her fingers clawing at the air as though she could still reach him, still cling to the illusion of the man she thought she loved. The sunlight caught her falling form, turning her into a fleeting streak of white against the dark, jagged rocks below. Victor didn't flinch. He stood tall, his expression as unmoved as stone. He watched her vanish from sight, swallowed by the ocean's furious waves. To anyone else, it would have been a sight of horror. To him, it was liberation. He straightened his jacket, adjusting the cufflinks that gleamed in the dying light of the sun. His breathing steadied. The plan was flawless. No one had seen. No one would ever know. By the time the authorities came, it would all be explained as a tragic fall. A pregnant woman, overcome by the dizzying height or perhaps slipping on the loose gravel, lost to the sea. He would play the grieving husband, devastated but composed, his fortune and freedom secure. For a moment, the silence was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic crashing of waves far below. Victor closed his eyes, letting the ocean's roar wash over him like absolution. But beneath the surface, fate was stirring. He couldn't see it, couldn't imagine that his perfect crime had already been witnessed by someone far more powerful than him. Far out on the water, a yacht gleamed like a white ghost in the fading sun. A man stood at its railing, binoculars in hand, his sharp eyes following the figure that had just plunged from the cliff. His jaw tightened, his pulse racing. Without hesitation, he shouted to his crew, "Turn the boat." Now, the betrayal had been completed, but the story was far from over. What Victor believed to be the end was, in truth, only the beginning of a destiny he could not control. The ocean swallowed her scream. Elena hit the surface with a violent splash, the icy saltwater surging into her lungs as she plunged deep below the waves. Her body twisted, dress billowing around her like a shroud. Panic clawed at her chest. She thrashed, fighting against the crushing weight of the sea, but the current dragged her downward. She could feel her child kicking weakly, as though begging her not to give up. "I can't die, not now, not like this." On the cliff above, Victor turned away, satisfied, never knowing that destiny had placed a witness in his path. Far out on the shimmering expanse of water, a sleek white yacht cut through the waves. At its railing stood Alexander Voss, a billionaire whose empire spanned technology, shipping, and oil. But in this moment, he was not thinking of money or power. His sharp eyes, trained by years of sailing, had caught the impossible, the unmistakable figure of a woman plummeting from the cliffs. He didn't hesitate. Full speed ahead, he barked to his crew, his voice commanding, "Drop the lifeboat, now." The crew scrambled, the polished deck vibrating as engines roared to life. Within seconds, Alexander ripped off his tailored jacket and shoes, tossing them aside. He dove headfirst into the churning sea, his body slicing through the water like an arrow. Cold engulfed him, the waves pounding mercilessly, but his focus was razor-sharp. Through the blur of bubbles and shadows, he spotted her, a pale shape sinking deeper, her arms weakly flailing. Her dress clung to her like chains, pulling her down faster. Alexander kicked harder, his muscles burning as he pushed against the current. Inch by inch, he closed the distance. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist just as her eyes fluttered shut. For a terrifying moment, she went limp in his arms, her chest convulsing as seawater filled her lungs. "Not today," he growled through clenched teeth, hauling her against him. The ocean fought back, waves slamming into him as he struggled upward with her fragile body. His lungs screamed for air, but he refused to let go. With one final surge, he broke the surface, gasping, dragging Alina's head above water. "Lifeboat! Over here!" he roared, his voice carrying across the chaos of wind and spray. Two crew members paddled furiously toward them in the small rescue boat, their faces tense with urgency. Alexander hoisted Alina's head onto his shoulder, keeping her airway clear, his own body a shield against the relentless waves. Her lips were blue, her chest still. By the time the crew reached them, his arms trembled from the effort, but he refused to release her. Together, they pulled her limp body onto the lifeboat. Alexander climbed in after, dripping, gasping, but unbroken. "Breathe," he urged, kneeling over her. He pressed his hands against her chest and began compressions, his voice low, steady, commanding life itself. "Come on. Don't you dare quit on me." The crew watched in silence, the only sound the pounding waves and Alexander's voice. Then, at last, Elena convulsed violently. A gush of seawater poured from her mouth, followed by a desperate gasp. Her chest rose, shaky but alive. Relief crashed over Alexander like a wave stronger than the sea itself. He cradled her gently, brushing the wet hair from her pale face. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed, unfocused, but alive. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. "I've got you." The lifeboat sped back toward the yacht, cutting through the swells. Behind them, the cliffs loomed ominously, hiding the man who believed his betrayal had gone unseen. But fate had intervened. As Alexander carried Elena onto the deck, wrapping her in a blanket, he glanced once more at the cliffs. His jaw tightened. He didn't know who had tried to destroy her, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he had saved her life for a reason. And whoever had thrown her away would soon face the consequences. For Elena, her nightmare was not yet over, but her salvation had begun. Warmth. That was the first thing Elena felt after the darkness. A slow, unfamiliar warmth that seeped into her chilled skin, wrapping her like an invisible embrace. For a moment she thought she was still dreaming, still drowning, still trapped in the ocean's icy grip. Her fingers twitched, brushing against something soft. Not water. Sheets. Her eyelids fluttered open. The world swam into focus, not jagged rocks and crashing waves, but a room bathed in soft golden light. High windows let in the gentle glow of the afternoon sun, curtains swaying with the sea breeze. The scent of salt lingered, but mixed now with polished wood and faint traces of citrus. She lay on a wide bed, a heavy blanket draped over her. Her throat burned, her chest ached, but she was alive. Her trembling hand moved instinctively to her belly. Relief surged through her when she felt the faintest movement. Her child, still with her. Tears blurred her vision. "You're awake." The voice was deep, steady, carrying both strength and gentleness. Elena's head turned toward the source. At the side of the room stood a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair damp from the sea, his shirt open at the collar. His piercing eyes, the kind that seemed to see through layers of silence, softened when they met hers. Alexander Voss. She didn't know his name yet, but there was something commanding about him, a man used to power, used to making decisions that shaped lives. Yet here, in this room, he wasn't looking at her like a business deal. He was looking at her like she mattered. "You nearly drowned," he said calmly, pulling a chair closer to her bed. "You fell, from the cliffs." Elena's breath caught. Images crashed back into her mind, the wind, the roar of the waves, and then, Victor's hand. His eyes. The shove. The betrayal. Her pulse raced, and she clutched the blanket tighter, her body trembling. Alexander noticed. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but firm. "You don't need to speak yet. You're safe here. No one can hurt you." Safe. The word felt foreign. She had once thought she was safe in her husband's arms, safe in their lavish home, safe in the life he built. But that illusion had shattered the instant his hand pushed her into the abyss. Her lips trembled. "My baby." Alexander's expression softened. He nodded. "Still with you. Strong. The doctor checked as soon as we brought you aboard." Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks, unstoppable. Relief mixed with grief, with anger, with confusion. She pressed her face into her hands, sobs shaking her body. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel it all. The horror of betrayal, the terror of nearly dying, the fragile miracle of survival. Alexander didn't speak. He simply sat there, a steady presence, waiting. He wasn't a man who filled silence with meaningless words. He understood that sometimes, silence was the only way to let pain release. When her sobs finally softened, Elena lowered her hands, her eyes red and swollen. He pushed me. The words tore out of her throat, broken but certain. Victor, my husband. He wanted me dead. Alexander's jaw tightened. For a moment, his controlled mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. Not at her, never at her, but at the cruelty of a man who could betray his own wife and unborn child. You won't go back to him, Alexander said firmly. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a vow. Elena looked at him, fear and disbelief swirling in her eyes. But, what if he finds me? Alexander leaned closer, his voice low, resolute. Then he'll find me instead. The conviction in his tone wrapped around her like armor. For the first time since her fall, Elena felt something stir in her chest besides fear, hope. Weak, fragile, but alive. She lay back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling at her body. Yet even as sleep tugged her down again, her heart whispered what her mind couldn't yet admit: maybe fate had not abandoned her on those cliffs. Maybe it had led her here. Morning sunlight spilled across the ocean like liquid gold, waves glittering as if the sea itself had decided to celebrate life. On the deck of Alexander's yacht, Elena stood wrapped in a soft shawl, the salty breeze tangling her hair. Her hands rested on her stomach, caressing the fragile miracle growing inside her. For the first time since her fall, her breathing was calm. Her body still carried the ache of the ocean's cruelty, but her spirit, it was beginning to heal. Behind her, footsteps echoed steadily against the polished wood. She turned, and there was Alexander, tall, composed, a cup of tea in his hand. Unlike her husband, he didn't look at her with cold calculation. His gaze carried no hidden agenda, no malice. Just a quiet, unshakable certainty that she was safe with him. You should be resting, he said, his tone more protective than stern. I couldn't stay in bed, Elena admitted, her voice fragile but steady. She glanced back at the horizon. After what happened, I thought I'd never see another sunrise. I couldn't waste this one lying down. Alexander set the cup on the railing beside her. Then watch it. Watch as many as you want. You've survived what was meant to end you. That makes every sunrise yours to claim. Her throat tightened. His words sank deep, melting the ice of fear that still clung to her heart. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, not heavy. The ocean hummed below, gulls circled above, and for once the world didn't feel like it was collapsing around her. She turned back to him, her eyes wet but fierce. You saved me. You saved my child. I don't even know your name. Alexander Voss, he said simply. Her eyes widened slightly. She had heard the name before, whispered at parties, spoken with awe in Victor's business circles. The billionaire no one dared to cross. And now here he stood, not as an untouchable figure of power, but as the man who had pulled her from death. Why? Elena asked, her voice trembling. Why risk your life for me? You didn't even know me. Alexander's gaze met hers, steady as stone. Because I couldn't watch innocence be destroyed. Because no one deserves to be discarded like that. And because, his voice softened, a rare crack in his armor. Because something told me your life still mattered. To this world, to your child, maybe even, to me. Her breath caught. No one had spoken to her like that before, not with Victor's polished lies, not with his empty promises. This was different. This was truth. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they weren't only from pain. They were from release. I don't know what comes next, she admitted. Everything I thought I knew, everything I trusted, it's gone. My husband, the father of my child, he tried to kill us. I don't even know who I am anymore without that life. Alexander reached for her hand, his touch firm but gentle. You don't have to know today. You just have to know you're not alone anymore. The past tried to break you. But the future, he glanced at her stomach. The future is waiting for you to claim it. A fragile smile broke through her tears. She squeezed his hand, her heart steady for the first time in months. Far away on the cliffs, Victor sat in his luxury villa, unaware that his perfect crime had failed. His empire, built on deception and blood, would soon begin to crumble. Fate was no longer on his side. But here, on the open sea, Elena felt something shift inside her. Strength, freedom, the spark of a new beginning. With Alexander by her side and her child still safe within her, she knew the betrayal that almost destroyed her had instead opened the door to a life she never dared to imagine. The nightmare was over. The new chapter had begun.